A board snapped under his boot. The child jolted and dropped the broken rifle. He grabbed her and yanked her behind the pulpit. Footsteps hit the porch outside. He cocked the revolver with one hand. Dust shifted beneath the shattered window. A shadow crossed the doorway. He pressed the girl flat to the floorboards. Glass shattered behind them. A voice shouted. He rolled, fired twice through the wall. Something heavy hit the side of the church. The girl crawled toward the broken staircase. He reached for her but froze. Boots slammed onto the roof above. A hand grabbed the bell rope from the rafters. The floor began to give. He looked up just as the beam snapped loose. The beam struck the pulpit and split it clean. The man dropped hard over the girl. Dust slammed into his throat. Splinters raked his arms. The floor shifted under his boots. He rolled and covered her head with both arms. The wall behind them cracked. The roof groaned. He shoved himself up and grabbed her by the waist. She was coughing. He turned toward the stairs. His side screamed. Blood warmed the inside of his shirt. He ran anyway. A shot punched the wood just behind them. Another ripped through the post near her head. He shoved her up the stairs first. They climbed fast. She nearly slipped. He caught her ankle. More shots came through the broken window. The stair rail exploded in dust. He kicked the loft door open with his heel. The glass glowed in the afternoon sun. He ran straight for the stained glass panel at the end. She looked back once. He didn't stop. He hit it shoulder first. It shattered in a scream of color. They went through. Air rushed around them. They hit the ground hard. He landed on his side. She tumbled into the dust beside him. His elbow cracked against stone. She gasped. He rolled over and reached for her. Behind them, the church wall shuddered again. He looked up. A shadow moved past the top window. Boots thudded on the floorboards inside. He pulled her up and started to run. He lifted her over his shoulder and crossed the broken rocks. The heat pushed down heavy on his neck. She kicked once but did not yell. He grunted and shifted her weight higher. The horse waited between two dry bushes, head down. He set her on her feet beside the saddle. She pulled back. He reached for her hand. She froze. He guided it to the horn and stepped up. The saddle leather creaked. He pulled her up behind him. Her legs locked tight around the blanket. He clicked his tongue once. The horse moved forward slow. They passed the last of the church stones. He kept his head down. His side pulsed under the torn shirt. She stayed silent. Her hands gripped the back of his belt. They rode through open brush. A lizard darted across the sand. Dust curled in lines behind them. The horse climbed a ridge. The man looked right. A dark figure sat still on a far hill. He pulled the reins left. She turned her head. He kicked once, and the horse broke into a run. They left the ridges. Behind, dry weeds slapped at their boots. He leaned low. Her chin bumped his shoulder. The land opened wide and flat. He veered toward a cluster of low rock. Wind picked up and stung his eyes. He blinked hard. The horse bucked once. She held tighter. They dropped into a wash and followed it south. The sun angled behind them. The light turned gold and sharp. Birds scattered from a dead tree as they passed. His hand slid down the reins. He leaned again and whispered something she could not hear. They crossed into dry gulch land. Stone on both sides. No sign of the rider. He slowed the horse. The hooves dragged. She slumped forward. He kept his grip on the horn. The rocks ahead shimmered. The sun dipped behind the bluff. The horse stumbled once. He caught her with one arm. The animal jerked sideways. He pulled back. They stopped in a patch of hard dirt and shade. He dropped to the ground. His knees buckled. She slid off behind him. He bent double and held his ribs. His hand came back red. She stood still. He looked up at her and nodded. She stared back, then turned and walked to the horse. He sat in the dust and let his breath slow. The horse snorted and shook flies from its neck. The girl reached for the canteen tied to the saddle. She stepped back toward him and held it out. He took it with one hand. She watched him drink, then sat beside him. Not close, not far. He wiped his mouth with the back of his wrist. The desert stretched quiet in all directions. The sun slipped low. He leaned his head back against the stone. His eyes stayed open. He stacked stones low beside the bluff. He pressed his back to them and let the heat fade off his skin. The girl sat just beyond reach, arms tight around her knees. He opened the canteen and set it between them. She did not move. Her eyes never left him. The horse stood tethered to a dead root nearby. Flies circled its ribs. The man removed his coat and folded it twice. He slid it under his head and leaned back. The blood had slowed. He kept one hand pressed to his side. The air was still. The girl turned her face away as he coughed. He reached for his saddlebag and pulled it close. His rifle stayed laid across the stone within reach. He didn't touch it. She watched it. Her shoulders did not drop. Her breathing was even. He set the saddlebag down and opened the flap. Inside was a bit of bread, a leather pouch, a folded map, and a second pouch, worn soft. He pulled it free and turned it in his fingers. She tilted her head but said nothing. He opened it and saw only thread, dried leaves, and a length of twine. He placed it aside, then reached for the smaller inner pocket. It held a child's carving. He turned it in the light. It was shaped like a hawk, sharp beak. Wings curved inward, worn smooth from hands. He looked up. Her eyes were on it. She blinked once and looked away. He held it between his thumb and forefinger. The memory came without asking. A dry ridge. A fire in the dark. His brother's hands covered in ash. The same carving passed into his palm. The hawk had no eyes then, only lines burned in with a nail. He shut his eyes. The wind came up and passed again. He set the carving down on the stone. She did not reach for it. The man shifted to lie flat. His hand returned to his chest. He pressed until the pain deepened and settled. The rifle stayed where it was. The girl leaned back against the bluff wall, her head lowered to her knees. She stayed awake. The stars began to show above the ridge. A bat moved once against the sky. The man kept his eyes on the dark, his ears tuned to the land. A sound in the distance could not be trusted. He did not sleep. Not yet. His fingers curled near the leather strap of the rifle, not around it, just near. The wind rose again. The stones held it back. She stayed still beside him. Her feet were bare. He saw the dried blood across one heel. He looked back toward the ridge, listened again. Still nothing. The carving lay between them. He woke to the sound of hoofbeats across the ridge. He blinked once and sat up fast. The girl was already crouched, eyes fixed to the horizon. He wiped blood from his ribs and pulled his shirt down. His fingers came away dark. He moved to the horse. She was already there, tightening the strap. He lifted her without speaking and climbed after. She held to his back before he gave the signal. He clicked and kicked. The horse leapt forward. They rode down the slope and into a dry gulch. The stone curved and narrowed around them. Thorns scraped his leg. Branches clawed at the saddle blanket. The horse slid once but recovered. His breath came hard now. They rose again over a low hill. The dust behind them moved. 3 riders. He leaned and urged the horse faster. The girl turned her head. The wind pulled at her hair. She pointed. The ridge broke left in a narrow split. He yanked the reins. The horse turned sharp. Dust flew sideways. They dropped between 2 sharp walls of stone. It closed in fast. He ducked under an overhang. The girl lowered her head to his shoulder. The sound of hooves behind them echoed once, then vanished. He let the horse slow. The pass curved again and narrowed further. Barely room to walk. He dismounted, lifted her down and took the reins. She followed close. They pressed through the last stretch of narrow stone. The sun flickered above. The air cooled between the cliffs. He moved with one hand on the rock. The other kept the rifle close. She touched the wall once, and then drew her hand back. A marking was there, worn by wind. He saw it and kept walking. The ground dropped suddenly. He stepped wide and caught her elbow. They slid together down into open land. Behind them, the pass ended in rock. The riders did not follow. He stopped and turned, listened. Silence. The girl turned to him and nodded once, then walked on. He followed her steps. The sun rose behind them. Dust lifted gently from the horse's legs. The open desert stretched ahead. Again. He pressed his hand to his ribs once more. The pain was deeper now. She looked back. He shook his head. They kept moving. Behind them, the narrow pass stayed empty. Only one vulture circled above. No more sounds came from the ridge. They had vanished clean. His hand slipped from the reins. The saddle creaked beneath him. His shirt clung wet to his side. Each breath burned. He leaned forward and braced on the horn. The girl looked back. He did not see her face. She slid down and caught the reins before they dropped. The horse slowed. He swayed, but did not fall. She tugged the bridle gently and walked. The horse followed her into the cactus flats. He stayed, slumped in the saddle. The sun pressed down without mercy. She stepped over thorns without shoes. She did not look back again. The land shifted ahead. She paused near a line of broken stones. A dead bush marked the edge of a circle. The circle held old wood, an abandoned well. She turned toward it. The bucket hung from a cracked rope. She tested the weight with one hand. It held. She pulled it up once and let it fall. A dull splash answered. She looked up. The man was sliding off the saddle. His boots hit the ground. He dropped to one knee, then both. His hand pressed to the side of the well. She knelt beside the rope and pulled. The pulley squealed, once then caught. She leaned her whole weight into it. The bucket rose slow. Water spilled down the sides. She braced her foot on the stones and kept pulling. The sun caught the edge of the water. It shook inside the wood. She reached for the rim and drew it close. The man crawled forward. His lips moved, but no sound came. She dipped her hand into the water and held it out. He drank. The rest ran down his neck and into the dirt. He fell back and rolled to one side. His chest rose shallow. She stood, walked to the saddlebag, pulled out the carving and brought it back. She knelt beside him and placed it in his hand. His fingers did not close around it. The light shifted across his face. The memory rose again. The same carving, years earlier, held out in silence by his brother beside a fire. The younger version of himself stood frozen. Aish blew through the wind. His brother said nothing. The carving changed hands. Then the figure turned and walked into the black. Never returned, never wrote, never found. The fire snapped once in the dark, then vanished. The man blinked. The carving was still in his hand. The girl sat nearby. She did not speak. The bucket swayed beside the well. The horse stood in shadow. The desert around them stayed open and dry. He let the carving rest against his chest. He breathed once more and closed his eyes. Flames cracked in the dark. Canvas ripped behind him. He stumbled forward through the smoke. Screams rose across the camp. The smell of horsehair and gunpowder filled his mouth. He dropped to one knee and raised his rifle. A figure ran past, too fast to aim. He turned. Another shape burst from the shadows. He squeezed the trigger. The shot cracked the sky but missed. Smoke rolled back toward him. He coughed and wiped his eyes. Children screamed from behind the lodge poles. One voice called out, clear and sharp. He looked toward it. His brother was standing still in the open firelight. Something burned behind him. The hawk carving was in his hand. Then the image broke apart. He woke, choking. His hand clutched the carving. The sun was high again. The bucket at the well had tipped over. The girl was gone. He sat up fast and gasped. His ribs locked. He rolled onto one elbow and forced breath back into his chest, then stood. The carving dropped from his hand. He left it in the dust. He limped across the clearing, found her tracks beside the horse, small, bare, sharp in the dirt. He followed. Up a slight ridge and past the cactus line. He stopped. She stood just beyond, knife drawn. Her back was straight. Her arm was steady. 4 riders faced her. All sat still. One reached for his belt. The man did not wait. He raised the rifle and fired. The sound echoed twice across the flats. The first shot struck low. The second kicked up dust near the front hoof of a horse. All 4 riders flinched. One yelled out and pulled his mount back. Another shouted and held up both hands. The girl turned slightly. She did not lower the knife. The riders did not move. The man stepped forward, rifle still raised, blood soaked through his shirt again. The lead rider dismounted and stepped out slow. His hands were open. His eyes were narrow. The girl looked up at him and said a single word. The rider nodded. The others stayed back. The man kept his rifle aimed. The rider did not speak to him, only looked once at the blood on his side, then looked at the girl again. She did not blink. She held the knife steady. The rider turned and climbed back onto his horse. The group turned and began to ride away. The girl watched until they were gone. Only then did she lower the knife. The man lowered the rifle. His legs gave out. He dropped to his knees. She turned and walked toward him. Neither of them said a word. The man rose slow from the dust. His hand stayed wrapped around the rifle. The girl stood beside him now. Her knife hung low by her side. The riders had circled back. Their horses stood still in the sand. The lead scout dismounted again. He walked forward with measured steps, no weapon drawn. His voice broke the silence. He spoke in Apache. The girl answered with no warmth. Her words were short. The scout paused, spoke again. The man watched both. The rifle stayed pointed low but ready. The wind moved across the plain. The girl said another word. The scout looked at the man, then back to her. His face did not change. He spoke a longer sentence, her jaw tensed. The man shifted his boots slightly in the dust. The scout turned to him. He spoke slow in rough English. Said she ran from a killing. Said her people wanted her dead. Said others might still follow. The man did not lower his gaze. His voice came quiet but hard. He asked if they would finish what others started. The scout did not answer. The other riders sat still. Only the horses moved. The girl stepped forward. She moved between them, her back to the scout, her eyes on the man. She did not speak. She did not raise the knife again, but she did not step aside. The scout watched her, then shifted his weight and looked past them both. He gave a slow nod, turned without a word, climbed back onto his horse. The others followed. They rode off in silence. No dust rose behind them. The girl turned slightly to watch them go. The man lowered the rifle at last. His fingers did not relax. She looked at him. Her face unreadable. He stepped back and sat down on a flat stone. His breath was thin. She sat across from him. She placed the knife down beside her. Neither spoke. The wind moved again. It passed between them. The carving was still in the pouch at his side. The scout party reached the horizon and vanished. No tracks pointed back their way. The girl looked west. He followed her gaze. The land opened wide with no sign of trail. The horse grazed in the shade. His blood had dried against the fabric. The heat pressed down again. The standoff had passed, but the danger had not. The girl closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them again, she looked older. He did not ask her anything. She did not offer anything. They sat without movement, both alive, both not safe. The man walked slow, with one hand on the reins. The girl walked beside him. Her footsteps matched his. The horse dragged behind them. Its hooves struck stone and loose dirt. The sun sat high but offered no warmth. The land around them rolled dry and sharp. No birds moved, no voices called. The girl kept her eyes forward. The man looked at nothing. His boots scuffed at each step. His side pulled tight with every breath. The trail narrowed between 2 shallow hills. They walked through it without a word. At the rise, she stopped. She reached into the pouch tied at her side. She held the carving in both hands. The wood caught the sun. She pointed to it, spoke one word. He stopped, looked down at the carving, then at her. Her eyes did not blink. He took a step closer. The word echoed in his ears again. Brother. The weight of it settled. His ribs tightened. He looked out over the plain. A single memory rose sharp. A man with the same eyes, dark hair, blood on his mouth, a promise left broken in the dirt. The man closed his hand over his chest. The carving had not changed. The girl waited. He said nothing. They moved forward again. The hills opened to a wide bluff. Below them sat a distant settlement. Faint smoke, small roofs, 2 wagons near a fence line. The man stopped near the edge. She stood just behind him. He stared down at the town. The dust lifted gently across the roofs. He turned to her. His voice was low. He told her she was free. He told her to go. She did not step forward. Did not turn away. Her hand moved instead. She held out the carving. He did not reach for it. She pressed it to his palm, then stepped past him. She walked downhill without sound, her shoulders steady, her head held even. The path twisted and dropped. She did not look back. The man stayed still. The carving stayed in his hand. The wind pushed lightly against his back. He watched her reach the flat stretch below. She crossed it slow. A figure moved near the outer fence. The girl kept walking. She passed through the dust like smoke. The man looked again at the carving. He closed his fingers around it. The same lines cut deep in the wood, the same shape as years ago. He did not move. He did not follow. But he did not turn away. He stayed there until she was gone from view. The sound of the town drifted faint on the wind. He placed the carving into his coat pocket and stood alone above the dry hills. He stood without moving as the girl walked away. Her figure shrank with every step. The dust followed her heels. Then she was gone behind the scrub. The silence deepened. He stayed still. His hand tightened around the carving in his pocket. A sound rose from the memory. Wood cracking, men shouting, firelight against torn canvas. His brother stood in the center of it all, face streaked in ash, eyes red from smoke. One sentence spoken low. Final. Then nothing. He had turned and walked away. The shape of his back was the last thing the man remembered. Now the same shape was fading into the dry land below. The man turned, stepped slow toward the horse. It raised its head, but did not move. He gripped the saddle horn and pulled himself up. His ribs screamed, his jaw clenched. He kicked once. The horse turned and followed the path downhill. The prints she left behind were light but clear. The trail curved along dry rock. Scattered mesquite leaned in over the slope. He passed an old cartwheel half buried in sand. A buzzard circled once high above. The trail straightened. The town appeared again ahead. Smoke from cook fires, thin shadows of fences. He saw movement near the trading post. A man stepped out of the doorway, rough shirt, broad shoulders. The girl walked past. The man caught her by the arm. Her feet slipped in the dust. She twisted once, but he held firm. The rider did not slow. He urged the horse forward. The saddle creaked under him. The carving pressed into his ribs. He rode straight into the edge of the street. The dust rose under the hooves. Voices began to rise. One man shouted. Another called from behind a stall. The settler did not let go. The girl tried again to pull free. Her hand struck at his chest. The man in the saddle did not yell. He drew the revolver with a steady grip. The sound of leather and metal turned every head. The settler looked up too late. The rider pulled the horse short. Dust shot into the air. The revolver was already pointed. The crowd froze. The girl stopped struggling. The settler's hand dropped away. The wind shifted the dirt along the road. No one moved. No one spoke. The rider's finger stayed along the metal. The weight of the moment settled on every shoulder. The girl stepped back. She walked behind the horse and stayed there. The settler raised one hand slowly. The rider did not blink. The sound of the hammer clicking back was louder than the wind, and it held there. Unfinished. The man stepped down from the saddle with the gun still drawn. The horse shifted behind him. The townsfolk held still. The girl did not move. The settler stared at the barrel pointed at his chest. His jaw tightened. Spit hit the dirt between them. His voice rose loud and rough. He said the girl had brought killers through his land. He said blood had been left in her trail. He said she was not a child but a curse. The man kept the gun steady, then holstered it. The motion was slow and final. He stepped closer. boots heavy in the dust. Their eyes locked. The man spoke only once. The words carried across the silent street. No anger behind them, no threat. Only weight. The settler blinked, took a step back, hands still raised. The crowd shifted. A woman pulled her boy behind her. A merchant leaned against his doorway and crossed his arms. The blacksmith watched from beside the anvil. A slow quiet filled the space between all of them. The settler looked again at the girl, her arm still marked from his grip. The wind tugged lightly at her dress. She held something close to her chest. The carving. Her fingers clutched it tight. She did not speak. She did not look away. The settler lowered his eyes. He stepped back once, then turned. He walked toward the corner of the trading post. No one followed. No one called after him. The crowd held still until he was gone. Only then did breath return to the street. A few heads nodded toward the rider. None spoke. The man turned back to the girl. She stood alone. She looked small again. Dust coated her arms and face. Her eyes never left him. He walked to her, kneeling slow so the pain would not steal his balance. He reached forward. She did not flinch. His hand closed over hers. She let go of the carving. He took it and placed it back into the pocket near his heart. She blinked once. The moment broke without words. The townsfolk turned back to their day. Doors swung open again. Work resumed. The sun moved slightly west. The man stood. She stood beside him. He touched her shoulder. She turned her head toward the hills. He followed her gaze. Far above, the church still sat in ruin. But it was waiting. They did not speak of it. Not yet. The sun rose behind the old church wall. Light touched the edge of the stones they had set the day before. He moved slow across the dirt, one brick in each hand. His steps dragged but steady. She was already there, kneeling. Her fingers pressed soft clay into the base of a new post. The fence leaned slightly to one side. He placed the bricks down and straightened it. She stepped back. He held the wood until it settled. They did not speak. They did not need to. The bell tower cast a short shadow across the wall. Its frame still burned in places from years past. He carried a coil of fresh rope in one hand. The other stayed low, resting often against his ribs. She waited near the tower door. Her eyes followed his every step. He stopped beside her and held out the rope. She took it with both hands. The fiber was thick and pale. She walked into the tower without a word. He turned and looked across the land. The town sat still below. Roofs like bones in the dust. Smoke curled above a cook fire near the fence line. A single dog barked and fell quiet again. Inside the tower, she moved with purpose. The rope slid through her fingers. She tied it firm to the old eyelet beam. Her hands worked with silent strength, no hesitation, no fear. He leaned against the frame of the door. His breath caught once but eased. He watched her step back. She pulled the rope down and let it fall. The sound came sharp, metal on metal. One clean note across the morning plain. Not loud, not forced, just enough to wake the dust. She stood beneath the rope. Her hand still held it. The bell stilled above. The air held its breath. He stepped into the tower. She turned to him. Between them lay no words, only the silence of what had been done, and the sound that now rested in the air between them. She reached into her pouch and brought out the hawk carving, held it one last time, then placed it on the worn stone near the rope. He looked at it and said nothing. His hand rested against the frame. The sun rose higher. The shadows shortened. She stood still beside him. He turned and looked once more across the land, then back to her. The bell did not ring again. It did not need to. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and comment on the Old Western Tales.